Stand by SOT1.
Standing.
10 seconds. Ready, rollin'. Ready, SOT1.
Ready.
In 4, 3, 2, 1. Roll in.
From legendary Uncle Studios in beautiful Southern California, welcome to another edition of Work Comp Matters, the central location for you employees, you employers, and of course, we haven't forgotten about you damn independent contractors. And now, here's this week's edition of Work Comp Matters.
Oh, I absolutely love it. I am prepared. We are ready to go. It is July 2nd, 12 noon straight up. Welcome to another edition of Work Comp Matters. I'm joined by the madman across the water, Mr. John Scalia. Dr. Mike is out. Scott Walton is engineering the show. We are, of course, brought to you by the workcompcentral.com if you want the number one location for workers' compensation in both California and around the United States. Check out the workcompcentral.com. They've got a free 7-day offer, and if you want to pick up their services, I have them. You should too, damn it. It's only $1 a day. Work Comp Matters is also brought to you by A1 Law, number one computer management system. 818-357-4120 for your no strings attached money back guarantee. Also only $1 a day. A1 Law. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Steve Appell, and I've got news hot off the press for you. You know, we've got about 225 shows in the tank. We started this show, this podcast, about 4 years ago. Our base, workers' compensation, California workers' compensation, and slowly but surely, we sprouted out, we grew, we marketed, we advertised, we reached out to the local Southern California and then eventually in the entire California community for current events. But I've got news hot off the press that's going back to my base. I've been doing California workers' compensation for 30 years. John Scalia has been involved in workers' compensation for 40 years, 50 years, whatever the case may be. And I've got news hot off the press. Starting August 3, workers' compensation trials in California will no longer be continued simply because parties are not allowed in court. Starting August 3, trials are going to go forward because there will be video. I don't know if it's going to be Zoom. I don't know if it's going to be AT&T. I don't know what those issues will be. But there will no longer be continuances on trials, California workers' compensation, simply because parties are not allowed in the actual courtroom. I want to go to John Scalia. You practiced for 35 years. Obviously, you never ran across this type of situation. But I am so happy. I am so pleased that finally, the state of California has worked it out so files can continue to be moved towards closure. Now, I know this is the case in Van Nuys. We file all our cases in Van Nuys. I'm assuming this is some type of statewide order. But John, I cannot think of anything negative about this. What's your take?
Oh, I agree. I mean, you have to the underlying philosophy of workers' compensation is that it is a benefit delivery system. And sometimes we laugh about that because, especially when you're representing the injured worker, you say, you got to be kidding me, right? This must be a benefit denial system. But no, the underlying philosophical premise of workers' compensation is that it is a benefit delivery system. And so I think it's a good idea that they keep the cases moving forward. The only danger that I see in any of this is that it's going to be, in a lot of ways, it's probably going to be a lot more sanitary, a lot more comfortable to do this via video than it is to do it in person, because things in person are always messy. For one thing, you have people alive and there. So the only thing that I can see as a downside would be the temptation to continue doing this type of format after the coronavirus passes, which it will, whatever that may be. And that's the only danger I see. The same thing I would say about when they went from taking doctor testimony in court to taking it by deposition. I mean, it becomes an easier alternative, and the easier alternative is hard not to keep a hold of.
All good points. And again, just to review, for all of my friends, my colleagues, my associates, my Facebook buddies, August 3 is the deadline. Workers' compensation, California workers' compensation trials will no longer be continued simply because parties are not allowed in the courtroom. Starting August 3, workers' compensation trials will continue. And speaking of insurance, California Insurance Commissioner Richard Lara yesterday announced the quote, invest in our diverse communities, close quote, initiative to identify diverse women, veteran, LGBTQ, says here, Asian, Pacific Islander, Black, and Native American owned investment managers who can guide investments made by insurers into socially responsible, affordable housing and environmental projects across the state. The initiative, damn, that's a long initiative. The initiative will identify investments managed or owned by diverse investment leaders to fund targeted projects with social benefits in the state, and is part of the California Department of Insurance California Organized Investment Network. John, I got to tell you, I know of California Insurance Commissioner Richard Lara, but in Guide to Investing and such like that, I don't get it. I just don't get it. It's a diversity thing.
Well, obviously, they're trying to encourage minority communities and business enterprise. Obviously, historic
work up their money.
Pardon?
To invest their money.
Well, yeah, and invest in them. I mean, if it's done socially responsible, it's as profitable and sometimes more profitable than regular investments.
I've just never heard the insurance commissioner. I mean, it's a relatively new position. I mean, we've had an insurance commissioner for 6 years at best, and now he's getting into diversified investments. I don't understand. I don't get it.
I think there's been an insurance commissioner for a long time.
Really?
I remember. Oh. Yeah, I remember one a while back. But you're right. I don't remember them being
getting involved in investments. Right. Exactly correct.
Right.
And no, and that's fine. However, something that I am familiar with is, and I know you probably are too, is traveling to New York. Okay, now, if you're planning on traveling from California to New York, you want to hear this next news story. Also, if you're going to New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut, they have added travelers from California to its quarantine list, and visitors will be expected to isolate themselves for 2 weeks upon arrival. The order does not apply to essential workers or people who are just passing through the states, such as drivers stopping at rest stops or people experiencing an airline layover. California on Tuesday, hang on really quickly. Walter, hold on really quickly. California, who on Tuesday broke a record for the most cases reported in a single day, 8,610. is among 16 states now under such travel order restrictions. Enforcement, however, varies from state to state, with New York taking a hardline approach that includes monitoring flight logs and asking travelers to fill out questionnaires on airplanes. And John, why don't you take a minute and comment on that, and I'll be right back at you.
Well, I think it's just what happens when you don't prepare for what's obviously coming. I mean, clearly America did a totally ridiculous job of getting ready for the pandemic. They knew the pandemic was coming, and you had a president who originally said it's nothing more than a cold. You know, as I said before, I have a friend who lives in San Diego, and he's really, really smart. I mean, he was getting his PhD in number theory, and if you know what number theory is, that's like the philosophy of mathematics. And Mike has comorbidities, a lot of them. And, you know, he's my age. I mean, you know, in my age, you either have you either have comorbidities or you're dead. But Mike has all these comorbidities, and he's a numbers guy. In the beginning of January, Mike saw what was happening in Wuhan, and he did the math, and he decided that it was certainly coming to America, and it was going to come in large numbers. He is self-isolated since January, okay? But this is when you're smart and when you're prepared. And America was neither of those things. So now you got a situation where even interstate travel, depending on which state you're coming from, poses a health danger to the people of the other state. So I'm not sure, you know, obviously it's not a desirable thing to do, but I don't see what else you can do.
And John, I appreciate that, of course. Going to San Francisco saw a 49% spike in hospitalizations over the past week as patients from San Quentin Prison and Imperial County were transferred to city hospitals, a dramatic change from previous weeks when hospitalizations stayed relatively stable or decreased. Quote, "We're on high alert, not just as a city, but also as a region," close quote, said Dr. Tomas Aragon, health officer for the city and county of San Francisco. He added, the next several days are going to be really critical. You know, there's no question about it. California, the United States, has seen a huge spike in COVID-19 diagnosis. Imperial County was mentioned in that story. You know, Imperial County is the most southern California county, which goes right to the Mexico border. And of course, it's no secret that a lot of people, Mexican citizens and other nationalities, have been crossing the border, the United States-Mexico border, specifically to get into United States hospitals in Imperial County. And the GAV, Governor Gavin Newsom, we call him the GAV here, the GAV specifically commented yesterday that he very much appreciated the way Imperial County is handling the COVID-19 crisis. However, he also indicated yesterday that 19 other counties are apparently not handling it well, and therefore he closed a lot of business establishments. One of the exceptions is San Diego County, which, if I'm not mistaken, borders Imperial County. San Diego County was not part of the 19 counties that the GAV mentioned yesterday. And apparently something is going right with San Diego County. They are doing exactly what the GAV wants, and they are being compliant. My name is Steve Appell. You're dialed into Work Comp Matters. We're brought to you by the workcompcentral.com. If you want the #1 location for workers' compensation in both California and around the United States, check out the workcompcentral.com. They've got a free 7-day offer. And if you want to pick up their services, I have them. You should too, damn it. It's only $1 a day. WorkCom Matters is also brought to you by A1 Law, #1 computer management system, 818-357-4120 for your no strings attached money back guarantee, $1 a day. A1 Law. Well, I've known him for a couple of decades. He was practicing California workers' compensation for 35 years. He was living the socialist life in beautiful Southern California. And a couple of years ago, he retired and moved out to damn friggin' Munich, Germany with his regular segment on Work Comp Matters, Mr. John Scalia. And John, you're welcome.
Thanks. Well, I'm going to talk about something that you may find surprising, and that is sports. You know, I am a socialist and I've always been a left winger and a radical student, but I love sports. Okay. I've had season tickets for UCLA basketball. I've had season tickets for UCLA football. I love college sports. I participate in sports. When I was at UCLA, I played in intramural basketball, which was really cool because we got to play on the Poly Pavilion floor. I played intramural football where we didn't tackle, we had flag football, but we blocked. I mean, we hit each other. And I love the competition of sports. I love the whole thing. I love the whole atmosphere around college sports. Now, let me begin talking about this by reading you the lead into an article in Sports Illustrated this day, which says, and I quote, "College football players need a union now more than ever." Yeah, you heard that right. College football players need a union now more than ever. Why do they say that? Well, okay. Let's talk. First of all, unlike, a lot of sports fans tend to be conservative. Obviously, I'm not. But they tend to be conservative, and they get their hackles all up when they hear, what? These kids are wanting a union? What's wrong with them? They're getting a free college education. They're going to these great institutions. They're not paying a dime. Okay. Well, part of that's true. They do get to go to these great institutions, and they don't have to pay a dime for the education. But most of them come from backgrounds where that's not nearly enough money to survive. And that's another problem. But the other thing is, if you don't know anything about college athletics, let me inform you that college athletes are employees. Let me tell you, they work harder than in any job they're ever going to have afterwards. Okay? I mean, they have intensive workouts. They have workouts in the gym. They have to stay in shape. It's a 24/7 job. And it becomes very difficult for them to maintain a regular academic load and a regular academic curriculum. They all have tutors because a lot of them need tutors, and you would too if you were trying to have all that physical labor and combining it with a college curriculum. But the problem is, now that we have COVID, this is really crystallized, okay? Because what's happened is colleges are intent on opening the college football season on time. Why? Well, without going into any great philosophical reasons, let me give you the bottom line. Because the NCAA, the National Collegiate Athletic Association, is a $4 billion business. That's right, billion with a B. And college football supports all the programs at the universities. Without college football, there wouldn't be any women's sports because they couldn't afford them. College football makes more money than even basketball at schools that are famous for basketball. So it literally carries the financial ball for the institution. Now they're coming back and they want to kick off on time. So they're bringing the students back to campus, the college football players. But the problem is they don't have a union. They don't have any ability to negotiate the terms on which they're coming back during this pandemic. And it varies from university to university as to how much testing they're going to get, as to what conditions, as to whether or not they can even refuse to participate if they think they're in danger and they don't want to. They have no say in the process. And yet they're working their rear ends off, and they're basically told when to do it, and how to do it, and where to do it by the universities. And so they need to, they do need to get organized. There's a union, there's a would-be organizer, guy who actually graduated from UCLA, played football there. He started it back with Northwestern when they had the original vote to unionize, and then it went off the rails. But the point is, college players are athletes, and right now their health is being put at risk, and nobody seems to be interested in protecting them, least of all the people who should be protecting them.
And John, I couldn't agree more. The only thing you missed is that college athletes are now allowed to be paid. That came down like earlier this year, late last year, right?
Well, yeah, they're allowed. Well, they're allowed to make some money. I mean, yeah, I wouldn't exactly call it allowed to be paid, but if you're a really famous guy on the team, and now for years the university has made money off their likeness and off their name on jerseys, and now the thing is, well, if you're putting the kid's name on the jersey, don't you think he should get some of the benefit from it? I mean, that all stemmed from another UCLA guy who played basketball at UCLA, Ed O'Bannon. I don't know if you remember the O'Bannon brothers who played at UCLA.
Yes, I do.
Okay, well, Ed was playing a video game. I think he retired to Las Vegas. He's playing a video game in Las Vegas. It was Eaton Athletics, one of those video games. And he looked at it and he said, "Wait a minute." He said, "That's me." I mean, it had his name on a jersey. He was one of the characters you could become in the game. And he said, "Well, how can this be?" So he went back and he said, "Wait a minute. This is a commercial enterprise. I'm not a college athlete now." Well, as it turns out, when you accept a scholarship to the university, you sign off the right to your name in perpetuity at that time. So here's Ed O'Bannon, retired from the NBA, even let alone college, and some Eaton Sports is making money off his likeness, and he gets nothing because he had a scholarship to college. I mean, yeah, it's just ridiculous. So some of that is being rectified, but that's a separate consideration from the one I was talking about, which goes to actually their health.
Yeah. And there's no question that money talks and BS walks, unless you're a U.S. consumer and want to buy a gun. U.S. consumers are rushing to buy guns as the COVID-19 pandemic and protests over police brutality combine with U.S. presidential politics to fuel unprecedented demand. Firearm background checks compiled by the Federal Bureau of Investigation, a proxy for gun purchases, jumped to a record in June as street demonstrations spread around the United States. That extended a surge that began in March as the coronavirus prompted lockdowns across the country. Now, I've said on the show many times before, I have fired a gun. I have never owned a gun, but I did check. You can't buy a gun today. They are just not available. They have all been sold. As I indicated at the start of the show, August 3, hot off the press, workers' compensation trials will no longer be continued simply because parties are not allowed in the courtroom. Starting August 3, workers' compensation trials will proceed with some type of video application. And nearly a year and a half after collapsing under a 30 billion, and that's B with a B, a billion with a B, 30 billion in liabilities from wildfires sparked by its equipment, Pacific Gas and Electric Corporation has emerged from the biggest utility bankruptcy in United States history. The California power giant said in a statement yesterday it had successfully completed its restructuring and exited Chapter 11. John, what's the next news story?
Well, this one is about Sacramento City Council to consider 9/11 overhaul, Inspector General to oversee police. The Sacramento City Council will Wednesday consider whether to overhaul, well, that's actually yesterday, the city's 9/11 system and hire an Inspector General for police oversight. The meeting, Mayor Darrell Steinberg proposed both changes earlier this month amid protests across the country and in Sacramento against police brutality following the police killing of George Floyd in Minneapolis. The 9/11 overhaul would shift the responsibility to respond to non-criminal calls away from police and instead to unarmed, non-police trained professionals. Those calls would include those involving homeless people and people in a mental health crisis. The idea could be modeled after the Crisis Assistance Helping Out on the Streets program in Eugene, Oregon, or the Youth Justice Coalition in Los Angeles, though it will have differences, a report from Steinberg's office released Tuesday said. In recent weeks, San Francisco Mayor London Breed has also announced the city is adopting a similar program, while Oakland is considering it. Interestingly enough, the head of the, I finished reading the article, it goes on and on, but the head of the Sacramento Police Officers Association came out essentially opposing both propositions. He opposed the sending of non-police trained professionals to nonviolent things, probably because, like I say, unions exist to have business for their members, and this takes business away from the cops. It would reduce their workload. When you reduce the workload, then people become redundant, or they can do stuff that they're more, they're better off doing for the public good anyway. But not only that, but he also opposed the inspector general idea, giving the old police canard, oh, those people aren't trained in police maneuvers. They're not trained. They're not trained. They don't know what they're doing, and they have no business judging what we do in the field. Well, you know what, Officer Davis? Actually, the taxpayer does have a right to judge what you do in the field, because what you're supposed to do in the field is protect and serve the taxpayer. And yes, you don't have to be a cop to know that it's wrong to put your knee on somebody for 8 minutes and 46 seconds and cause them to die. So, but it's the typical response, which is, no, we're against it because it's going to take stuff away from our members and it's going to put us under objective scrutiny.
And how the hell do you expect to properly train law enforcement if you're going to cut their budget by $100 million? Makes no friggin' sense to me.
Well, you're not cutting the budget by $100 million. What you're doing is you're either not increasing the budget, or you're transferring the budget from some other places. But the training will not be affected. The idea that you're cutting down on the training of officers, I'm sorry, that's just absurd. That's not going to happen. It never will happen. And that's not what's involved. Then, of course, when people want to throw the scare into you and say, oh, this legislation is terrible because it's going to do this, that, and the other thing, well, no, it's not. I mean, that's not what's involved.
And the last story for Work Comp Matters: executives at the State Board of Registered Nursing falsified data in reports to the California State Auditor to make it look like the board was properly managing nursing investigations when it wasn't. The auditor announced this past Tuesday the board is responsible for investigating misconduct by nurses and can take disciplinary action, including suspending nurses' licenses. The auditor found in 2016 that the board was assigning too many cases to each of its investigators, and that investigations were often taking more than 3 years, even in cases including allegations of patient harm. It has been another wonderful Work Comp Matters podcast. As we started off the show, we'll end the show August 3. Workers' compensation trials will proceed even though parties are not allowed in the courtroom. August 3. Be prepared and be ready. I want to thank the madman across the water, Mr. John Scalia, for assisting me today. Mike was on vacation. Scott Walton of Uncle's Studios, and all the good people back at WorkCompCentral, the WorkCompCentral, that continue to support and approve of this valuable project, including but not limited to Kristen Chavez. My name is Steve Appell. We'll see you again tomorrow at noon for another edition of Work Comp Matters.